Well, it's been a little while since I've been live on video through WCCO radio, but here we are once again. We're live on our social media channels. We get a great opportunity to talk to Dr. David Schultz from Hamline University about the pending, we're still saying pending, indictment of former President Donald Trump. Because Dr. Schultz, we first of all, welcome. We talked to you on the air a couple of days ago when we thought it might happen, but here we are. We're still waiting. So yesterday it was announced that, the grand jury would not meet yesterday. And now I see reports that they might not reconvene until Monday.
Right.
What do we read into this, if anything, at this point? What do you read into this?
A couple of things. First off, what I've heard today for Thursday on Thursday is that the grand jury is meeting, but hearing other issues because they've been impaneled for a variety of things. So on one level, we could just simply say that, listen, maybe the grand jury's got a lot of other more pressing work to do, and therefore we can't read anything into it. Another possibility is the fact that we had earlier this week a person testify who called into question, we think, Michael Cohen, who's one of the critical witnesses for the prosecution. And some are speculating that maybe now the Manhattan prosecutor is reevaluating the case, or maybe wants to bring Michael Cohen back or get other testimony. I mean, we're trying to read tea leaves when we don't even have the leaves in front of us. And so It's a little hard here to really figure out. But my suspicion probably is that they still are in the fact gathering stage and have not reached a decision with the grand jury yet.
Let me ask you this, because you brought this point up on the radio the other day, and that it was, say what you want about Donald Trump, if you like him or not. It was a brilliant move for him to announce that he was going to get arrested, that he was going to be indicted, because it sucked all the energy away from Ron DeSantis. It sucked all the energy towards him. I had somebody text me yesterday when we were met with another delay, suggesting that, do we even really know if a indictment is close, or is this possibly manufactured by Donald Trump just to get attention? Is there that possibility at all, or is there enough evidence there suggesting that, yes, an indictment is imminent here?
I want to say yes. So you look at me and say, what do you mean yes? And I say, yes, it could be totally manufactured. Yes, there could be an indictment imminent, or there could, yes, be no indictment coming. Part of the problem with a grand jury is the fact that it's completely behind the cloak.
Right.
And we don't really know what's going on here. But having said that, I still stand by my proposition that what Trump did the other day or last week was so smart. He, at a time when it looked like DeSantis was starting to gain on him among Republicans, he forced the Republican Party to kind of like circle the wagons around him. And the polls this week now are suggesting that the momentum is shifting back to him. Over the weekend, Donald Trump apparently raised a boatload of money, millions of dollars for his campaign. And it looks like he's what? He painted himself, that is Donald Trump, as the persecuted Republican being picked on by a Democratic prosecutor in a Democratic city. Very, very smart move on his part. But getting back to the core question, we don't know. We don't know. I think he created a sense of urgency, kind of like crying wolf. And now we're all sort of like waiting. And it could have been all along. We could have still been weeks away from a decision by the prosecutor, but now we're kind of waiting with bated breath.
Furthermore, there are reports indicating that if the former president is indicted, that he actually wants to be handcuffed and led into the courthouse to further that, persecution look, that he's a man who's being persecuted, whose political opponents are coming after him legally. I guess that shouldn't shock us at this point.
It doesn't shock us. Now, two things I want to say here. First, whether you like Trump or don't like Trump, if he gets indicted, I think this is a sad day for the United States to have a former president of the United States indicted for a crime. I don't think this speaks well, no matter what, and it's just a statement here. I want to say it. But additionally, maybe being handcuffed and being in an orange jumpsuit plays well with Donald Trump's base. But I'm not sure this plays well, let us say, either with the rest of the Republican Party or clearly with those independent voters, he's going to need to still be able to win. So it's looking at his supporters that it plays well. Again, I don't think being in handcuffs in a jumpsuit generally helps you in terms of running for office.
I'll push back just a little bit. I mean, yes, it is sad if a former president is
Right.
indicted, but also isn't there some positives though, saying that because you hear a lot of people saying, nobody's above the law,
Yeah.
and even a sitting president or someone who's been in that position, that they have to be accountable to the law as well. Couldn't you make that argument?
I think that's exactly the good point here. Take us back a generation ago when the President Clinton basically had his law license taken away from him
Mhm.
because what? He committed perjury. He lied under oath. I thought, as much as it was sad, it was a good message to say that even the high and mighty get sanctioned for things. Now, should he have been charged? Perhaps yes. But here, the same thing. We shouldn't be cutting a double standard. The double standard being what? That we would sometimes say, well, because he's president, he gets away with certain things. Now, what's interesting when you're saying also about being handcuffed, I'm going to say for probably the vast majority of Americans, if they're arrested, it's going to be not announced. They're going to show up with the arrest warrant, handcuff you, read your Miranda rights, and take you away.
Mhm.
With oftentimes white collar criminals or people accused of white collar criminals, people who are more affluent, what happens is they call them up. That is, the prosecutor calls them up, calls up the attorney for the person and says, will your client voluntarily surrender? There already is a double standard. I guess in some sense you can say charging him proves that everybody's equal under the law. And if he's handcuffed and brought into court, maybe it's an effort to say, well, I'm just like everybody else, even if I'm worth $1 billion.
We talked about this too. Dr. David Schultz from
Yeah.
Hamline University joining us here. We talked about this too with the other three legal situations that the former president finds himself in. We both kind of agreed that this one seems to be at least the less of the serious allegations he's facing. On that note, uh, another judge in a different case says the attorney-client privilege that the president was afforded might not apply here, that he, in fact, the lawyers might have to testify as to their conversations with Mr. Trump. That seems to be a significant legal defeat for him.
That is a significant issue. When I teach in law school, I actually teach legal ethics to law students, and it's called the crime fraud exception. It is incredibly difficult to crack attorney-client confidentiality, that you as a prosecutor have to have pretty good evidence that the conversations that took place between the lawyer and the client are evidence of a crime. The fact that a judge and a court of appeals said you has to testify, the prosecution must have an incredible amount of evidence in that case about something going on. That is significant because this is a case that gets us into the questions all about the documents at Mar-a-Lago. What did Trump know? Did he purposely withhold those documents? Did he take them? That's an incredibly serious charge there. The New York charge, I don't want to downplay. What most people are speculating, it might be a felony fraud charge with about 4 years in prison if convicted. Some of these other charges in guarding, taking of government documents, classified documents, carry some pretty significant felony charges that get us up into what clearly double-digit numbers. So that is something to worry about, and the fact that the crime fraud exception, incredibly rare, was invoked and able to force the attorney to testify, really bodes not well for the president or ex-president.
And again, just remind us of we've got all these different cases going
Yeah.
independent of each other. These prosecutors aren't working
Yeah. So
together,
yeah.
but tell us how they are connected in the fact that, okay, let's say this grand jury in New York does hand up an indictment. Do you see
Okay.
a
So
situation
let's
where, go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, so just quickly, we've got the New York case involving the payoff to Stormy Daniels.
Yep.
We've got a grand jury that has already come back, but we don't know what the answer is yet, what they're going to do involving Georgia, whether or not, and it revolves around the president's conversation to the Secretary of State, and that could be federal or state charges, but in this case, probably state charges about interference with an election. We've got the investigation into the documents at Mar-a-Lago, and we've got a reference from the January 6th committee to the Justice Department surrounding the actions of January 6th. All of them are pretty serious. They're all separate. But how I connect them is given the fact that we have never had a president or an ex-president ever in American history charged with a crime. My suspicion is people are uncomfortable about being first. If one happens, let's say the one in New York happens first, I think it's kind of like the breaking of the dam, and you might very well see other prosecutors say, "Okay, I'm not the first to do this. Somebody else has. We can move forward." But again, just because an indictment in one happens in one doesn't mean there's indictments in others. Each of the investigations is about separate crimes involving separate facts.
Well, a nice calm weekend for former President Trump. I mean, he's got nothing to worry about. I can't
That's
imagine
right.
the
Yeah,
I
he could just go golfing at Mar-a-Lago.
right. That's a lot to think about. Again, we'll have it appears we're gonna have to wait through the weekend and find out to see if anything happens on Monday. At this point, Dr. Schultz, um, is there much more evidence that this grand jury in New York can hear about? You mentioned Michael Cohen. To me, that's a big part of this is just how trustworthy is Michael Cohen. He doesn't seem like that trustworthy of a guy, but
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I mean,
how,
we're not. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, this is a case where we don't seem to have too many model citizens at this point. We've got an adult film star. We got Michael Cohen convicted of felonies. I mean, it's a pretty ugly looking case. But as I posed it to my students the other day too, so let's assume for the sake of argument that Trump is indicted in New York. Let's say it goes to trial, and let's say there's testimony. The jury's got to listen to Michael Cohen. Let's say Donald Trump testifies. The job of a jury is to weigh competing credibility. Cohen says, "Yes, I did this on behalf of the president." The president says no. Who's a juror going to believe? I don't know. I mean, I would hate to be in the juror's spot at that point, assessing it. And this is, I think, the difficulty the prosecutor's facing. Again, Michael Cohen is not a Boy Scout. He's not a model citizen at this point. I think they have to be thinking in terms of if he testifies before a jury, how credible is he going to be?
well, you certainly are credible, sir. And Dr. Schultz, we always appreciate the time that you give us. And I love how you describe it, the way you describe it to your law students, because I think we all need to kind of at least get the Cliff Notes version of how to
Yeah,
understand all this. And you do it in a great way. Dr. David Schultz from Hamline University. Thank you, sir. We appreciate the time today.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. And thank you for watching. I'm Adam Carter. Thanks for watching here on our social media sites and always for listening on WCCO Radio.